Do you want to know why you're constantly losing games? It's probably because you're struggling with one of the first 5 shots of the game. The serve, the return, the third shot, the fourth shot, or the shot that almost no one talks about, the 5th shot. Most players don't even make it past these first 5 shots, and they wonder why they are struggling to score. In this video, we're going to dive deep into the first 5 shots and how to never miss them again. Let's jump right in. All right, the very first shot, super important. Yes, it starts the point, but we want to put as much pressure as we can on your serve. We're going to start with the stance. That's the first thing. Now, some players serve in an open stance like this, but what I suggest, especially if you're starting out, is more of a closed stance. Kind of like when you're hitting a baseball or when you're hitting a golf swing, okay? So stance is super important. I would start a little bit wider than shoulder width, and this is going to give you a good strong base. Next, number 2 is going to be keeping your backswing simple. Yes, there can be a really big backswing, or you can have a lot of momentum by doing that. But if you're just starting out, what I would do is keep it simple. I like to start with my backswing with this paddle face that I'm hitting the ball with facing to the ground, and I'm just gonna start it right here by my right hip. All right, tip number 3 on the serve is the hip rotation, hip and core rotation. When I'm hitting this ball, I am not just using my arm like that, right? I want to be able to engage my core and rotate my hips through my swing. So you don't want to forget about that. All right, tip number 4 is contact point. Whether you're doing a volley serve or a drop serve, we want to make sure we get that contact out in front. This is what I see a lot. That's what you don't want to do. We want to get that contact out in front of us right here so that we can see it and we can have a good contact and see the ball out in front, and it makes it easier for us to get power and spin. So what I recommend, if you're doing a volley serve or a drop serve, extend your hand out, drop it out here. Or if you're gonna do a volley serve, you're just gonna let it go out in front of you. All right, 5th and final tip for the serve, which is going to help you get more spin and help you get more power, and which I also think is gonna help you gain more consistency, is having a consistent and full follow through that ends high over your shoulder. There are many times I see players using their arm, not rotating their hips, but also just stopping their follow through, and they're ending over here or over here, different places. But what we want to do is we want to make sure we follow through ending high over our shoulder. This is really important because we're starting low, ending high, and that's what creates that topspin.
All right, let's talk about the return. As we know, you are at the advantage of being the returner. So when you return, it's very important to make sure that you are hitting a good return so you stay in the driver's seat and stay in the offensive. So tip number 1 is your positioning on the court when you are going to return. I see a lot of players playing right up here at the line. I even see some players in the court and way back at the fence. So typically, I give myself 2 steps back or even 3 steps back based off of the server and how deep he's serving to me or she's serving to me. And usually this is a good spot to be. If you do need 1 extra step, that's no problem at all, but you do need to give yourself at least some room just in case that serve is right at the line. Tip number 2 is your forward momentum. When you are returning, your job is to get yourself to that kitchen line after you return. So if you hit your return and you find yourself falling back, that is way more work for you to get yourself to the kitchen line than it is to take those steps back and then get your weight going back forward into your shot. So once you go to swing, your weight should always be moving forward and then bringing you to the kitchen line. Tip number 3, and possibly the most common mistake I see when players are returning, is running through your return. All right, do not run through your return. When you are here at this line, you have to make sure once the return comes, your feet are preparing you to get ready for that ball, and then you should be stopped and planted. So if I see that return coming my way, I set up, I plant my feet, I'm in my close stance, and I hit my shot, and then I can move forward towards the kitchen line. If you guys are moving through your shot, you will get jammed and you will lose power and you will lose control on your return. So make sure your feet are set and you keep everything in front of you. Our fourth tip is our contact point. As much as we want to keep our weight forward, we also need to make sure our ball is in front of us as well. So when my weight is going forward and my ball is in front of me, this is the cleanest point of contact for myself here to have power and control, which means if I'm back here, I'm losing a lot of that. So once I go to swing, I make sure my contact point is in front of my front leg, and from there, I make my swing. Our last tip for the returns is making sure you have a long follow through. Typically, when players start to hit shorter returns, most of the reason is because they stop their paddle too short on their swing. So when you need that little bit extra depth, you can provide it by swinging through your ball and following through all the way up to your shoulder, all right? So once you swing, it should not be stopping once you make contact. You have to send it all the way through, and notice it helps me bring my weight all the way forward and into my shot. Make sure you guys work on these tips. Let's get into the third shot drop.
All right, so let's get right into the very famous third shot drop. Now, this first tip is probably the most important. If you're not gonna take away anything else, this is the most important. Make sure that you create enough space between the bounce and yourself. Why is this? Because we do not want to be hitting our third shot right off the bounce. We actually want to create enough space, allow that ball to come up if we have time, and hit our third shot closer to the apex, to the peak of the bounce. By doing this, it's going to buy you more time and it's going to be a lot easier to control the ball. So tip number 2, this is a very, very important key thing when you're hitting your third shot drop, and that is having your momentum moving forward. Every time we have our momentum moving backward, we can still hit a drop that way, but we're gonna lose control every time we don't have control of our body moving forward. So part of that goes with the first one, is creating that space. Sometimes that return is closer to this baseline. We might have to create some space between the bounce and ourselves so that we can actually hit that ball and have that momentum moving forward. All right, so that leads us to our third tip, contact point. You see a common theme here. We always want to contact that ball out in front. And again, creating that space will help. A lot of players contact their third shot drop really late, and I would call late right around here. Again, if we can hit it around our left toe line or a little bit more out in front of us as a right-handed player, if I could hit it right around here, this is good contact, and this is where I'm going to have the most control. So make sure that you keep that in mind. So tip number 4, we're gonna talk about the backswing. The 2 things that make the entirety of the stroke is the backswing, how far we take it back, and the follow through. If your third shot tends to go way past the non-volley zone line and really high, you might want to consider shortening up your backswing. Lots of players are taking their paddle back way too far, and that can cause really high third shot drops. So I like to start mine right around here, and then I'm just going to be lifting up towards my target. All right, last tip, tip number 5 for the third shot drop. We wanna make sure that we are swinging from a low to high motion. Obviously, there's a net that we're trying to hit over, and it is a game of how much do we give it. Obviously, we're going to have to practice and drill this shot, but the biggest key thing here is we can't be swinging laterally like this. We have to make sure that we're lifting up on the ball, whether you're hitting with topspin or you're hitting with a little bit of underspin. Your swing path is always going to be in a low to high motion. All right, now let's get to the 4th shot.
All right, let's get into tip number 1. Let's talk about our positioning on the 4th shot. I personally Need to make sure that I am in a wide, low base. I have my feet a little bit wider than shoulder width apart. I'm bending my knees and sinking my butt and getting a little bit lower while my upper body stays upright and my paddle is going to be in my ready position. In tip number 2, we are going to talk about how we need to apply pressure to our opponents by trying to take every ball in the air first. When you are here at this kitchen line, your toes need to be as close to this line as possible, but be careful, do not fault by stepping on the line or in the kitchen. But when I'm here, I am trying to take as many balls in the air as possible. And if I can't, hey, no sweat. Tip number 3 is what kind of volleys we use when we are trying to keep our opponents back. Based off of the height of your opponent's ball, if it's a little bit higher towards your chest, you're going to be using what we call a punch volley. If it's a little bit lower, more towards your waist or below, you are going to be using what we call our topspin volley, all right? Now, this is completely based off of your opponent's ball that they hit at you. So let me show you the punch volley and let me show you the roll volley. Notice on the punch volley, it was a higher ball and I got to punch outward. On the lower ball that I had to topspin roll, I had to project upward, but that topspin is what sends that ball up and over the net, but then drops down lower towards your opponent. Use both of these, try both of these, try and get comfortable with them. Remember in tip number 2, when I told you guys not to sweat if you can't take a ball in the air? Well, this is where tip number 4 comes in. If you guys find yourselves taking very low balls in the air here below your knees, this is what we consider our red zone, all right? We should never be trying to be too aggressive in these red zone spots. So if you find yourself here doing this a lot, you need to make sure now that you can take a step back and allow this ball to bounce up, so maybe you can now attack a higher yellow ball. So again, we shouldn't be making contact down here, and I'm gonna show you exactly why. Did you see how low that ball was? I couldn't do anything with it. I either put it in the net or I had to pop it a little bit higher. So instead of taking this ball in such a low zone, I'm now going to make sure I can step back and I can look to possibly attack my opponent who's now moving forward. So notice in that last example, I had to take a big step back, get myself some space for a good contact point, which then allowed me to attack that 4th ball. If you guys don't have this space, you guys need to create it by either taking one big step back or even shuffling back to give yourself the time and the space to make your shot. Our final tip for the 4th shot, we now know how to execute this shot. Now we need to know where to put it and what to do with it. So once I'm in this position, I need to make sure I am trying to keep my opponents back towards the baseline. If they are starting to transition towards the kitchen line, I'm going to try and aim for their feet as best as possible. So I'll show you exactly where I need to put this ball if they are moving forward. If they stay back, my goal is to keep them back. Those are the tips for the 4th shot. Let's jump right into the 5th shot.
All right, so now let's jump right into the 5th shot. And talking about the 5th shot, I just want to set the stage here. Sometimes you're going to be hitting your 3rd shot drop and you will get up to the non-volley zone right away. But many times, especially in higher level play, we are still going to be working our way through this transition. So the first tip is the split step. What is the split step? The split step is putting your feet in a position where we're not moving and we're well balanced, okay? So it's gonna look something like this. As soon as I am coming through this ball, I'm going to split step right before my opponent makes contact. And this is really important so that I can prepare early and I'm in a good balanced stance to prepare for my next shot. Now to tip number 2, talking specifically about the split step, we want to make sure that we're in a really good low and wide stance. Why is this? Well, number 1, when we're in this transition zone, our feet are exposed a lot. So what that means is our opponents are usually going to be hitting right at our feet. So what we want to do is actually get in a low stance already, because chances are the ball is going to be coming right down at our feet. All right, so now let's hop into tip number 3, which is going to improve your 5th shot, and that is your paddle position. Depending on where you are in this transition zone, you might want to adjust your paddle position slightly because of where your feet are. So for example, if I'm way back here, I'm in a good wide stance, there's really no need to set my paddle like I would be at the net, like up here, right? Why is that? My feet are exposed. I only have a couple feet behind me. The only possible option for my opponents to hit at is at my feet. So I'm gonna actually have my paddle super low in this ready position, defending here. Now, if I'm closer up to the non-volley zone line, and let's say I'm here for my 5th shot and they are still attacking me, they could still probably attack kind of towards my body and keep the ball in. So maybe my paddle position's a little bit higher. Depending on how deep you are in the court, you want to make sure you drop that paddle position down. All right, so now let's jump into tip number 4 for your 5th shot, and that is lifting up on the ball. Okay, these balls are going to be coming at you pretty fast, and they're going to be most of the time at your feet. So when we're taking balls this low, we have to have that paddle face open, and we want to be lifting. We have to lift softly up on this ball. When we're down here, we're going to be lifting with our shoulders. So whether it's your forehand here, you can see here, or my backhand, whether I use one hand or two, I'm always lifting with my shoulders in that wide base. That's the easiest way to control the ball. Tip number 5, this is the last one, super important. We want to make sure that we are not swinging or volleying the ball like a punch volley. I see a lot of people in transition, they're in a good low stance and they're swinging at the ball. They're taking these shoot swings, their back swings way back here, or they're actually punching the ball like they're attacking. Remember, when we're trying to reset the ball in the transition, this is a defensive shot. So we want to make sure, like I just said, we're lifting from our shoulder and our swing is really very, very short. All I'm doing is lifting. I might use my legs a little bit to control that lift and that ball, but for the most part, I'm never swinging, never punching. And that's actually how we pop up a lot of our 5th shot. So if we want to get that ball landing in that non-volley zone, make sure you do all those 5 things. If you struggle with any of these 5 shots, comment below on which of them is actually the hardest for you. In the meantime, if you'd like to get personalized coaching on your serve, 3rd shot drop, or reset, we just created an app in which you can send in your film so that we can coach you directly from your smartphone. If you want to check that out, go ahead and look at the description below, click on the link and download the app. See you in the next video.